Welcome back everyone. Well, in this session I am going to talk about CSS positions, and positions is very important and something that you do need to know, as I already told you in previous session. And in general, positions, sometimes positions could be using positions could be a great idea, and sometimes using positions could be a terrible idea. And what do I mean by that? Well, let's first find out what positions are. I have created a new file called positions.html, and there we have some styles, and I have some p tags for creating a long text. And in middle of these long texts that I have created a div with a class of container, and there are three boxes inside them. Okay, they all have two classes, one box. They all have the box class that we have here. So this is our container. We have let's get back to, we have a border red color for this so that we can see where this div exactly is, and it has a height of 400 pixels. And these are our boxes, that every box that we have displays in line block. Width is 100 pixel, 100 pixel height, and these are our boxes. So now what we are going to do is to choose one of these boxes, for example box 1. The box 1 that we have, I am going to set the position to relative. We saw a little about relative position, a little, that when we assign relative position to something, we can now control that with the four new CSS properties will be unlocked for this box 1 now. Because we assigned position relative, the position is not static anymore. The position of everything by default is static. So the position is not static anymore. So now four new CSS properties is unlocked for this box 1. And those four are top, right, bottom, left. And as you can see, for example, when I say top 25 pixel, you can see it has a distance from top, and the distance is 24 pixels. And in order to understand that its difference with margin, we saw that we can, for example, let's here create a p tag, some text inside this container, so that we can have that some text inside this container, and we can see, hit refresh, and let's use 50 pixel rather than 25 pixels, and this is what we see. So this is different with margin, because margin, when we use margin, the margin will push this text down, will push the text down. And but as you can see, in position relative, it has nothing with this the other text. It doesn't care about anything around it. It just moves 50 pixels from top. So when we say top, we mean 50 pixels from top, not towards top. So this is a relative position. Then this is it. We can control it with top, right, left. For example, go ahead and have a 20 pixel from right. Hit refresh, and this is it, 20 pixel from right. So and we can also use left, or I can go ahead and comment them left, so that you have them. And there's another thing, bottom. I comment them out because you can download the codes and have access to the codes, and you can see that there are two other commands that is unlocked for this box 1. So this is position relative, something that we saw. And now again, let's give to our box 2 a position of, a position absolute. The position absolute is the second thing that we are going to learn. Let's use this top and right, the exact top right for this the thing that we just used. When we do that, you can see that the box 2 where we can find the box 2. This is the box 2 here on top. So when we set the position absolute, it doesn't care that it's inside the div. It doesn't care where this div is located at all. When we say that you need to have a 50 pixel margin from top, the top is the top of the content in our body, our body content. This is our window here. This is all of our window here, and 50 pixel from top and 20 pixel from right. And this is exactly, as you can see, this is what happens. And the other thing that we are going to learn is actually position of fixed. And the position fixed is exactly like position absolute, but with a difference. So we used right there, let's use left for this. And when we hit refresh, it's exactly like the position absolute, but it's fixed, and when we scroll, it is still there exists. It's just fixed there. It doesn't care about scrolling. But position absolute, it just goes and sits there forever. And there's something else that I want you to know. Let's get back to our code, and this is the fixed position. Rather than using top, let's use bottom. And when we say bottom 50 pixel, left 20 pixel, and let's use right 20 pixel as well, what happens, do you think? Well, the result is that from the left it has 20, so it has remembered when we say the left is 20 pixels and the right is 20 pixels, you can see it is listening to left 20 pixels. But let's get back to our codes, and this box that we have has a width of 100 pixels. So it's trying to force this div to have a 100 pixel width. So let's go ahead inside our box and unset this width. When we unset this width, it unsets the width, and let's see what happens. And this is what happens now. So when it has no width, the thing that happens is that it says we are going to say, hey, go ahead and have a 20 pixel from left. Okay, 20 pixel from left. And then we say right 20 pixels, it says okay, 20 right. So this is what happens to the div when it has no width, when we do not force them to have a width. But if we force them to have a width, for example 2500 pixels, this is what happens, and it's listening to our left rather than right. Let's change the left and right order here. Let's see what happens. Let's come back here, hit refresh, and still it's to left. So it has nothing to do with the order. It's just that the left, when we say left and right, it listens to left compared to right. So this is it. Let's go ahead and unset that. Sorry, what happened? Let's go ahead and unset this width again, and as you can see, this is a result of our fixed position. There's something else. Let's go into our codes and let's create a div. Actually, let's duplicate this one and just replace 3 with 4. And inside our box 4, we are going to use something called position sticky. So as you can see, we saw what absolute is, fixed we saw, relative we saw, static is just nothing, the default, static, and these two, forget about these two. We are going to learn 1, 2, 3, these 5 main positions for now, and the other ones is just the other general CSS properties. So let's learn about sticky, and let's see what position sticky is. So I'm going to give it let's give it a display of block, okay, and a width of 100%. Let's do you know why am I giving this display block and one with 100%? Because already in our box selector we have given a display and given a width, so that's why I'm trying to override what we have in that. So rather than doing that, I'm just remove the box class from that. Okay, so now that we have removed that, we do not need to specify that. The div is a block by default and the width is 100%. And we set the background color to CYAN. This is also a color name, another color name. I'm gonna say go ahead and your top is 0, from right 0, from left is 0. A height of 100 pixels, and hit refresh. And well, at first you might think that nothing happened, so let's first increase our height in this arc. This is our container, this red area that our box 4 is actually inside that. So let's increase the height and set that to, for example, 1200. Save the code and hit refresh, and now as we can see, the position is sticky and nothing happens at first until you keep scrolling onto that div. For example, we are scrolling right now, but we haven't arrived to our box 4 yet. So let's keep scrolling, and as the moment that we arrive at our box 4, you can see that it's sticky. So it's on top because we have set top 0, right 0, left 0, and this is what happens. And maybe it's because of some other variable that it's not 100% to the very right, and actually it is because of the other variables, because it has a padding. This div actually has a padding and that is affecting that, but we're gonna fix that. The fact about this sticky position is that this box 4 is now sticky at top, sticky until we are keep scrolling and we pass this div, this red div that we have. So that's what happens. So this is let's get back to our positions HTML. This is what happens, and if we remove our box 4, let's remove that. I'm holding the Alt key and hitting up arrow so that I can move this. For example, let's see, this is how we can actually move something. So let's put box 4 at there, and as you can see now, this is what happens. And when we scroll, it doesn't care about any div now, because it's actually inside our body. Exactly. So if we go ahead and set the margin of the body to 0, because let's hit inspect element, and as you can remember, our body has a little margin, and this little margin that body has, and this is sticky position, is something that is inside our body. So that's why when we say left 0, that's what we mean by left 0 and right 0. There is still a tiny little bit space between there. So we can go ahead and select our body and give it a margin of 0, set the margin to 0, and come back, hit refresh, and as you can see now, this is completely the left 0 is actually left 0 and right 0 is actually right 0. So this is position sticky, and these are 5 main positions. Static, which is the default one and nothing happens, it's just a static. Relative, absolute, fixed, and sticky. These are all that we learned. And the last thing that we need to learn is a combination of relative and absolute together. This combination of relative absolute is actually very useful and something that I myself use a lot compared to the other positions. And in order to find out what that is, let's first here at between these two texts here, let's create a new div here, and we call it RC, and RC stands for relative container. So I'm gonna select this RC and .rc and give it a position of relative, and I'm going to give it a border of 4 pixels, solid green and dark green. this is what I'm going to use, and the height of this would be 250 pixels. And let's get back to our code, hit refresh and go up. This is our div here, and as you can see, we can see that. And also I am going to give it a little margin from the around it, and I'm going to give it a large margin, a 50 pixel margin space, and this is our relative container. Okay, and we have now I'm going to create a div called and I'm going to give it a class of box. Okay, box, and I call it a b for absolute box. This is our absolute box inside that. Okay, and now that we have our absolute box in that, and I'm going to apply some CSS properties to this box. So I'm going to go ahead and select that. So our .rc.box, go ahead and select that box inside that RC class that we have, and I am going to give it a position of absolute. Okay, position of absolute. Okay, and I'm going to give it a top, for example, negative 20 pixels, and I'm going to give it a right of negative 20 pixels again. So what happens is, at first we might think that, okay, it's position absolute, so this position absolute doesn't care that it's inside a div. So before I hit refresh, you might think that, okay, top negative 20 pixel and right 20 pixel, it goes up this around there, right? But let's hit refresh, and as you can see, it's there, and it actually cares about this div. So what happened exactly? So absolute position is doesn't care about its parent div if the parent div has a static position. So as you can see, this box 2 is inside this red div that we have. This red div, our container actually has a static position, so that's why it doesn't give it doesn't care about the parent container. It just, when we say top 20 pixel or right 10 pixel, it just doesn't care about that. It's compared to the screen. But when we combine relative and absolute together, and it's something that used a lot, we can position our box compared to this green div that we have. And this is something that is used a lot, very commonly used. Because, for example, let's imagine that we want to create a card, and at the top right we want to have a price, and say that the price is for example $10. And as you can see, sometimes at the top right of a div or of a card there's something there, and that's position absolute and relative is used for that. And what do I mean by that? If you search card price HTML, you will see some cards, but for example here it's a combination of absolute and the middle one. Do you see the middle one here? I think the middle one has an absolute position, and now that's best value that you see has a the card has position relative, and that best value has a position of absolute, and the top is actually, for example, and top 0 left 0, something like that, and they have rotated the best value. We haven't seen rotation yet, but we will see how then we can actually rotate something in CSS. So that's this combination of relative and absolute together is something that used a lot. Sorry, this video took a little longer because I wanted to cover everything about positions in one video, and now we have covered everything. So let's sum up what we learned. So if we sum up what we learned in this session, the first thing that we realize that this position relative is, when we say top 20 pixel, it's almost like margin top 20 pixel. It's almost like that. So it's just we are moving the relative element compared to its original position. So and this is and about absolute and fixed, we saw that we are uh, locating the element with a specific coordinates in the screen. For example, we say top 20 pixel, right 20 pixel is just compared to the whole screen, except the combination of relative and uh, absolute that we use. And this is an example for our uh, positions, relative or fixed or absolute, that you can see. But the only difference between fixed and absolute was that when we scroll, absolute will disappear, but when we the fixed position will not disappear. And this map helps you actually to understand and memorize these things a little bit better. And the sticky position is just like at first it's just like a static, nothing changes, but when you keep scrolling and arrive to that element, it becomes to act like a fixed position. And this is the combination of relative and absolute that we had, and we can uh, set the position of the absolute container, absolute element compared to its container, which is a relative element. So these are what we learned in this session. So hope to see you in the next one. But before we go on, sorry, before we go on, there's something very important that I need to tell you, is that sometimes I'm just trying to say, be careful when using absolute positions and these all other positions at all in general, because when people use positions, some people that they are beginners, usually they think that they find a solution to every problem. So now they say, okay, whenever I have a problem, I just use these positions and I just move the element around with what I have. I'm going to talk about this danger of using positions in next sessions, but it's just something that I'm saying, be careful when using positions, because sometimes you create a project and I've seen these beginners when they learn positions, they use these positions a lot. When I teach them, this is always that I have experience. Don't look at my face. I look like a teenager with 18 years old, but I have actually, I'm 28, 29 years old, and I've been teaching programming a lot, and they all make the mistake after when I teach about positions. They use these positions a lot. So this is something to be careful about it, and not to use them a lot, and it has its disadvantages, and I'm gonna tell you in next session more about that. So this is it. Hope to see you next session.